everybody. ADNA presents. Today, we're very lucky and happy to have Tom Wlodkowski with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Tom.
Hey, Roy, good to be with you.
Thanks. I know your title is Vice President of Accessibility at Comcast, and I know there's so much more that we can talk about. So, if it's all right, can we start with what you love about audio description?
Yeah, what I love about audio description really is, how it brings me into the show or the event. Of course, we're recording this during the 2022 Winter Olympic Games, and NBC is offering live audio description on the primetime coverage of the NBC Olympics broadcasts. If you think about figure skating, or if you think about the opening ceremony, if you caught any of that action, a lot of it's just music. And without that description, you're really, or I should say, I am really, as a blind person, just left out of the equation altogether. And it's hard to imagine now that we've been offering live audio description with the Olympics since 2016 with the Rio Games, that prior to that, that's how I experienced the opening ceremony or watching events with my wife. I think in those situations, you really see the value of audio description. Of course, we see it in movies and TV shows and pre-recorded content, but I think the Olympics and some of these events really are stark examples of the value of audio description.
That inclusion that you're talking about, whether it's with your wife or maybe conversations at work or whatever, that it sounds like it takes out that bump in the road of the conversation too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it did little things you pick up. What does this person look like? Or just little social cues as well. So I think, there's a lot to it. And I feel that I've really had the privilege of being on both sides of it. Began my career in accessibility at WGBH in Boston with descriptive video service in an outreach capacity where we were working on a federal Department of Education grant on how to describe kids programming. I remember going to the Francis Blend School for the Blind out in Chicago and LA and other places where we were sitting down with blind kids and asking them, somebody would write a mouse-sized fruit bat. And you'd have somebody making a mouse like huge mouse, like arm's length, almost like the wingspan of an eagle. I'm like, if I ever saw a
Wow.
mouse that big, I'd freak out. Um, and starting to realize, like, well, that might work for an adult, but man, we got to get more tangible, maybe the size of a dinner plate or the size of something else. And so to see how description has evolved in the 30 years since I was doing that is really amazing. And to know that we still have a long way to go.
I love that you mentioned the 30 years that description has evolved. There's so much joy to unpack there. I think a lot of audiences, as well as even some creators of audio description, aren't aware of that 30-year history just because it seems like so many things are happening recently, both culturally as well as technologically, that are making that evolution just popcorn. It's like, uh, if I may, one of my first experiences with Xfinity was that special button that I was able to tell a family member, just ask it to turn on audio description. And it was literally that simple. I think about those kinds of access points that make all the work that's happening behind the scenes, whether it's the live audio description for Olympics or some of those kids shows that you were involved with in the outreach, that all of this content is here, but then to have that final step make it so difficult, it seems like that, among other things, have removed other barriers. As far as
Yeah.
our audiences go, can you address some of those things that Comcast specifically has done as far as accessibility?
Yeah, it's interesting. 30 years ago, we always had that problem of how do you enable SAP, and then there were VCRs that had a switch on it. Some devices had remotes with dedicated buttons, but a lot didn't. And who knew at the time, I certainly didn't, that I would actually be on the other side of that equation and be responsible for figuring out how to make audio description easier to enable. And so what we like to say at Comcast is that you're no more than a simple voice command or single key press away from enabling an accessibility feature. And so in your case, you were telling a family member, just use the voice remote, hold the button down and say audio description. And if you do, and we're going to toggle it. If it's off, we'll toggle it to on. If it's on, we'll toggle it to off. And as we know, that's bouncing between the default program audio and the SAP channel. You can also go through on X1 our accessibility settings, and you can map the B key on your Xfinity X1 voice remote to be a shortcut key to toggle audio description. The default mapping is to turn on what we call voice guidance, which is our talking X1 interface. Kind of figured kind of hard to get to the audio description menu if you don't have any kind of text to speech coming through the TV.
Sure.
So unfortunately, for AD producers, the talking guide had to win out on the default shortcut race, but we do make it possible for someone to change that mapping, and you could either turn on audio description, you could turn on closed captions, and everything has a voice command too. So we're all about multimodal ways of interacting, and voice is not a one size fits all solution for everyone. And so we have to have alternate means of access. And so that's kind of where we started when I joined the company in June of 2012. And then we were in the middle of the communications, 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. And a lot of the different pieces of that involved, what they called one-touch access to closed captioning. Well, if you're going to do one-touch access to closed captioning, we're already underneath the hood. Let's go make it one-touch access for audio description as well. And so that's how a lot of that came to be. And then the voice remote came out. The voice remote does over 1 billion commands a month. So we know that's a popular way for a lot of people to interact with us. Why not just have those features tied to a voice command? And that's what we did. And then we took it one step further and we said, well, we got people with ALS and other physical disabilities who can't hold a remote, who may not be able to speak, but they can use assistive technology like eye gaze software, the Tobii Dynavox eye gaze products and others on the market, where their eyes are their mouse, but we can meet them where they are because X1 is designed such that if you could sign in through a web browser with your username and password, you could select what set-top box you want to control. And now we have people controlling their X1 experience with a blink of an eye or a single switch device. And so it goes well beyond audio description and kind of the traditional TV accessibility things that you might think about, closed captioning, et cetera. But it all comes down to the same premise. And, I've always said when people are at home and you're trying to chill, you don't want to work hard to figure out how to use your technology. You might have to do that for your day job, but when you're at home, no one else is struggling the way we used to in the blind community or in the disability community at large for certain things. And so that's my job, is to try and to make it as easy as possible. Don't always get there all the time, and maybe it's not always perfect for everyone, but we try to get to that common denominator wherever possible.
What I love hearing about this access, like trying for the chill versus not working hard, that is a form of access. Like you said, that struggle. And I think about those questions that you and your team are able to ask. Why not do this while we're under the hood? Why not take it one step further? That these questions are coming up behind the scenes to be able to deliver that kind of access for the chill, the chill
Yeah,
access, I guess. What,
absolutely.
what I'm wondering is, and I've read a little bit briefly. I'm curious if you could expand on this, the importance of you hiring talents with disabilities to be able to have those conversations come up. Those, hey, let's remember this is something else that we can do. Can you talk a little bit about your company's focus on hiring talents with disabilities?
Sure. So we are definitely committed to advancing employment opportunities for people with disabilities, as are many large companies out there. And in general, again, very high unemployment rate in the disability community. So we all need to do more. Many of us are trying to do that. But we get feedback in a number of ways. Certainly, having employees with disabilities on the job, myself included, brings a different appreciation to the design and development process. There's no question about that, right? A lot of designers and developers may not have had the opportunity to interact with an individual with a disability. So
Hmm.
having that right there at the table is, I would say, an imperative these days. But we also get feedback through a variety of other mechanisms as well. In the past, and we will do it again as needed. We've hosted roundtables where we bring segments of the disability community in. Sometimes we bring a cross disability group in, and we connect them up with product leaders, designers, engineering, customer care. Hey, what's working for you? What isn't working? One example in the blind community was, hey, we need our bills in large print and braille. How do we get them? And well, we have our dedicated support center for customers with disabilities. Here's the number. You call them up and request one, and we'll add you to the list of bills that get generated on a monthly basis. What about, well, okay, if you could do bills in braille, then what about my channel lineup? Can I get that in braille? And channel lineups are unique by market. Not everybody has every channel in a market too. And so because of that feedback, relationships with a vendor that will generate braille or large print channel lineups in addition to braille or large print billing statements, so that if people for one reason or another can't get online or just don't feel comfortable in that way. So a lot of that comes from not only employees, but direct consumer feedback. We have partnerships with the major blindness organizations, certainly work a lot with the Audio Description Project and ACB on these things. So feedback comes in a variety of ways. Just checked out your Facebook page, the audio description discussion, seeing some good feedback on the Olympics and live audio descriptions. Some people liking it, people asking about how come the describer's stepping on the announcer. These are all good points to raise. And unfortunately, that's kind of the challenge of live audio description. You don't know when the announcer is going to speak while you're trying to describe it. It's not pre-recorded. It's not scripted to the second. They're just trying to react on the fly. But those are all good discussion points, and that's all great feedback that we want to get, and we seriously take that feedback. We did a focus group after the last Olympics. We partnered with an organization, and we had the NBC chief audio engineer. We had accessibility people. We had people from the Olympics production team, all listening to people talk. And we had the describers. We had Norma and Tony, who are describing the Olympics for us now, on the call, and just saying, hey, well, okay, well, how do you handle the parade of athletes when they come into the stadium? Well, boy, it would be great if you could tell us more about the flags or this or that, or maybe there was a little bit too much here. Let's cut that back. And it continues to get refined. And even as I listen to it now, every once in a while, I'll get to put my consumer hat on. and there are things that I want to bring up and say, geez, how do we want to deal with replays? Like one of the skiers, I forget her name now, I should know. Her second race in a row, she went outside of the gates, and the describer is naturally describing the images on the screen. But if we describe it once, do we want to describe it again in the replay? I guess maybe we do, but also I want to hear the announcer. And so do I want the describer to change, or do I want to get to work on the technical side and find a way to separate the audio description from the program audio so that I can have both, the best of both worlds?
And what I'm hearing in this integration, whether it's discussions with the AD Live announcer, the product leaders, the feedback from the audience, is that all of this integration, whether you're talking to Tony and Norma or whoever, that it's more than just, okay, well, we did it. That this is clearly not just a box to check, oh, we did audio description. That this kind of nuanced conversation is happening behind the scenes, and a lot of audiences are aware of these changes that are happening. It's so great to hear this integration.
Yeah, we're committed to it. And look, we found a little bit of a niche for ourselves in the live audio description piece. So we in 2020, we for the first time did the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade with live audio description. We continued that in 2021. And then in 21, we layered in the 4th of July fireworks from New York. We layered in the Rockefeller holiday tree lighting. We had been doing musicals, beginning with The Wiz back in 2015, continued it this year with Annie. And Comcast, NBC Universal, and now Sky combined are one of the largest global media and technology companies. And so for me, it's really cool to be able to bring these ideas forward and actually watch other people that have joined the company bring ideas forward. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting there and hearing audio description of the parade, and hear Al Roker tell people that audio description is on the SAP channel. I mean, man, that's a long way from 30 years ago where I was trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to describe programs for kids.
Yeah. Wow, what a great evolution.
And you guys, the describers, we can't do any of this without you. We don't always work together on that side, right? I mean, I'm kind of on the distribution side, you're on the production side, but both sides are required to really make this what we want, which is an equivalent chill experience. Let's put it that way.
There we go again. I love it. I'm curious if you could address this evolution. I can't help but think that behind the scenes in putting everything that you've put together, the things that you've shared here, that there are a lot of assumptions, either internally or maybe even from the audiences, or maybe some challenges that come up that you're really proud that you overcame. Is there anything that you could share that's public that could give maybe a little more perspective for things that we maybe haven't discussed yet?
Talk about a challenge that's ongoing that we haven't addressed, and it will take the industry and all of us to address it, especially in the legacy broadcast and cable world. You don't see this as much of an issue on the streaming side. I'll talk about two challenges, but the first challenge is audio quality. And we gotta, over time, and there's reasons why it is the way it is, but over time, we need to get to a better place where when you want to watch a program with description on, and you're an Xfinity customer or another pick cable provider, pick distributor, that you're getting full 5.1 surround or Atmos with audio description appropriately placed. There are many challenges all over the technology stack in the chain that programs go through to ultimately come through your television speaker
Hmm.
or your home theater speaker. And that series of challenges is something that I'm asking my team to start thinking about. And I have a person who leads innovation on my team that knows a lot about broadcast and cable technology. So, and we have great support, as I mentioned, in the NBC team. And so can't say anything yet because I don't know how how we're going to solve these things, but that's one, right?
Very good.
Another challenge is we need to keep the description with the content, right? And that's a tough one. And we get dinged on this in a variety of ways. So, as you know, Roy, the program rights are complicated, right? And then there could be multiple rights owner for the same program. A film studio may feed us the content. Maybe the film studio did a partnership with another network who also feeds us content for on demand. So we're getting the same show from essentially different providers, even though it's the same show. And so where we get into a challenge is the consumer sees that you can buy this movie for $29.99 and it has audio description, but yet you can watch it free from this network who provided us the content,
Mm.
but the audio description isn't there. Man, am I
Yeah.
glad I set up the support center for customers with disabilities and I don't have to answer that question myself.
Yeah.
Somebody else can answer that one.
Wow.
I mean, that's
Wow.
a tough one, right? Like,
Yeah.
so how do you deal with that? And how do we start to change that? And I think again, there are lots of reasons for it. It's not because people wake up and they say we don't want to do this, right? I think we're beyond that. I think
Mm.
people, most credible media producers, studio producers, I think, at least for tier one content, are committed to doing this and growing it. And okay, people are at different stages of it and how they came to the table. Let's leave all those discussions. Let's just look at the positive that we're getting more content. But these are the types of challenges. How do we move this content and keep it intact so that I don't have the same issue? I don't control the relationship that the original producer has with the other rights holders that are also feeding us the content. I'm just at that point the distributor, right?
Hmm.
It's on our platform. and we see a lot of people redescribing content that's already been described.
Yeah.
And I'm sure and maybe that's good for business in some ways, but in some ways it may not be, right? Because now does somebody have the budget to do it, or whatever. So that's another challenge that I think is going to take a collection of industry to really sit down and talk about.
Wonderful answer. Thank you for both of those. The From audio quality to description following the content or with content, those are, yeah. That's a big seed challenge there. But it's great to hear that it's on the plate, that it's on the conversation, that these are surmountable, that it's being at least looked at, addressed, and handled in the best way possible for where we are and where we can go. That's a really exciting. Thank you for sharing it so clearly too. I think a lot of our audiences have, rightfully so, been concerned and frustrated, but understanding the content of the background and where things can be headed, even though they're not necessarily there right now. It's great to hear that this is being, whatever this ends up being, that it's on the way.
Of course, it's not going to happen overnight, but
Yeah.
at least the conversations are happening. And the good news is, versus maybe where we were 5, 10, 15 years ago, most of the companies that need to be at the table for those conversations all have accessibility professionals on the inside. So,
Oh, wow,
so the
great.
conversations are a lot more informed now than what we as consumers remember from years gone by.
Wow, big smiles on that for sure. Tom, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
No, do you have anything? This is just a great hang. Just
I'm having a
talking to my
blast.
friend Roy over here,
Yeah, this is great.
geeking out on audio description.
Let's also follow up on how, if someone does have a compliment that they want to give to Comcast, or something that they'd love to see. You've mentioned that there's different ways to connect. Is there anything off the top of your head that you might be able to share as far as if someone did want to give some feedback?
Sure. You can send us an email, accessibility@comcast.com. Probably the easiest way. Certainly, we have at Xfinity for social handles, and people can tweet or however you want to interact with us that way. You can certainly go to Comcast Help and Support and search on accessibility and find our chat, and you can chat with an agent. You could also call our call center. Change a little bit how you can interact with our call center. Now you can just dial 1-800-XFINITY, and when you get to the IVR, just say accessibility, and you'll get transferred over to our call center. So that's another way that you can reach our dedicated team of 70 plus agents focused on making sure that customers with disabilities have what they need to get the most out of their service.
Ah, great news.
So let me turn the tables. Can I turn
Sure,
the
sure.
tables on you? So
Here we go.
all right, it's a podcast, so why not? So what do you see as the biggest change in the world of audio description over the past, say, 5 years?
It's technology and culture. And you've addressed a lot of these that, we've had 130 experts on audio description like yourself on this podcast, and being able to share those nuanced perspectives and conversations in a way that our audiences have been unintentionally shut out of, I think is giving a real excellent perspective on what audio description can be. I look at, behind the scenes, the Television Academy now includes audio description narrators credits
Cool.
to qualify to be able to vote for the Primetime Emmys. That feels like an accessibility win, even though there may be sighted and blind voice talents that are doing this. But just for the Television Academy to acknowledge this work feels like a big win. And as I think about the times as a TV Academy member going to some of the networking parties pre-pandemic, that there were a lot of people that when they heard what audio description was would lean in and say, wait, you mean my show that I've produced for the last 2 years has audio description? I have no idea. And that kind of awareness is, it's the sense of curiosity that they have, that they do recognize this is bringing more people, what is it, 30 million blind and low vision Americans, 250 million internationally, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's a market share. And there's a reach there that the content providers who have spent so much time, so much care and energy and money to be able to bring access, it's like, why not include blind and low vision audiences in their
Yeah,
work. And going back to what you said about the description following the content, it seems like the ownership of that in the sense of, there's some real expert audio description content creators that really know what they're doing. You mentioned GBH. There's countless others that
oh,
really
sure.
they know what they're doing and they care about it. It's not a bottom line check a box. And I'm wondering if those content creators themselves, the producers, the ones that are hiring the best gaffers, the best audio engineers, on the post-production side, can also include these teams on that side so that it is that package deal that gets sent off to the distributors so that it's one less thing for the distributors to handle. I'd imagine if I was handling 2,000 pieces of content, I'd like one less step, you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's a pipe dream, but I also see that including blind professionals in this work in every aspect. The Oscar-nominated film, say his name, 5 Days of George Floyd, had an all-blind team on audio description, and it was fascinating to see how people reacted, both sighted and blind. That wait, a blind writer of audio description? There was a lot of curiosity and a lot of questioning in all aspects of that, but it got done. And it's an outstanding piece of audio description work that it did have that care and concern that came from the perspective of blind leaders who were
Hmm.
creating it. And the resistance that came from that, just the fact that it was like, well, once I hear it, then I'll make my judgment. Simply by hearing that there was an all blind team, I think shows that we've got some more steps to go, but it got done and it was wonderfully done. And it's like, it's modeling how inclusion of blind professionals means so much. And as more people who are blind are training in this work, whether it is on the quality control side or whether it's on the voicing side or engineering or even editing or writing or whatever aspect of audio description, that it's going to make this work so much better. And that excites me to no end. I feel like I'm rambling, Tom.
That's good. I'm glad it's great to get the other perspective because I'm so focused on what happens once you guys describe it that it's good to get visibility a little bit further upstream as to what's going on. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the underlying takeaway is we've come a long way, but there's still work to do.
Hmm.
And there are two of us right here that are committed to doing that work. And we know there are many others that are going to join forces with us. And let's keep the conversation rolling. And hopefully, we check in periodically on this podcast or wherever, and we can celebrate the accomplishments as they come.
I love all of that, Tom. Thank you. And this really sparks a lot of great conversations. Thanks for bringing accessibility to the chill factor.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity.